Conditional Release Program, a podcast that delves into the netherworld of cults, crims and con artists. We don't like these people in the shows. We believe the best way to expose them is to hold them up to a harsh light, point our index fingers in their general direction and mock them mercilessly, take them down a peg or two until they cease to exist in any other form than the shit on our shoes. I'm Jack the Insider, otherwise known as Peter Hoisted for tax purposes.
And I'm Joel Hill, and today we are looking at the wellness community, which is a harmless bunch of wackos flogging motherhood statements and home remedies until we get to making largely unfounded claims regarding serious medical conditions at times when they should all just shut the fuck up. But will they? No. They just keep trolling, grifting, and creating false hope for people who are wide open to suggestion in a moment of extreme vulnerability and will pay anything for a treatment or a cure.
Well, let me tell our listeners, aromatherapy doesn't cure cancer. If it did, I would have been burning frankincense and oil of cloves, snorting the fumes up my left nostril for much of the last 5 years. The Cancer Council of Australia released a survey on Thursday, February 4, that was World Cancer Day, by the way, with some alarming results amid the headline figure. 150,000 Australians were diagnosed with cancer last year, while some 50,000 Australians died from it. But the survey also went on to describe how many Australians have fallen for the wellness trap. The survey of 1,000 Australians from 18 to over 76 years old, commissioned by the Cancer Council, showed 1 in 5 Australians said they were likely to have changed their behaviour based on something they read online, e.g. not from the mouth of a qualified mental health professional. And that included 1 in 8 people who might do so according to a story they read on social media. Almost 2/3 of people believed your doggo could sniff out cancer, and 2 in 5 thought cancer could be cured by alternative therapies that have no scientific backing. Fuck me dead, 40%. And the survey also found that nearly half of respondents believed sunscreen contained chemicals that were bad for you, and 8% didn't realise you didn't need to burn to get skin cancer. I wonder where that shit came from, Joel.
Maybe our mate Pete Evans, Jack?
Well, Pete fucking Evans is right on top of the list of clowns who have been bullshitting gullible listeners, especially in relation to skin cancer prevention and cancer treatments in general. But he's not the only one, and we're going to get right up him and provide some welcome sage advice should you or anyone you love get the dreaded diagnosis.
Oh, yeah, rather not. Now, we're also going to discuss how large sections of the wellness community have gone batshit crazy over the COVID pandemic, grifting people into believing that either COVID doesn't exist or is some fucking hoax or is no worse than the common cold and that can be treated with the shit these con artists sell. Oh, what a fucking coincidence. Which, yes, does actually involve a form of drinkable bleach. It's miracle mineral solution. Yeah. It's fucking embarrassing. So... and the thing is that some of these fuckwits sit in positions of power and influence that form public health policy. Yes, I'm talking about you, Craig fucking Keller, you absolute scumbag. And the supposed adults in the room, like fucking ScoMo, are doing fuck all about it. Oh yeah, I went and I talked to him in my office. They need to be told to go and sit in the corner of the party room with their little dunce hats on and shut the fuck up.
I can tell you're angry, Joel, and so am I, but we have to wait and repress that anger. Push it down further and further, stick corks up our asses so it won't seep out until we get to our deeper dive where we can gingerly remove our stoppers and properly explode.
I'm fucking keen. But now it's time for the Conditional Release Program's Weekly News.
On Monday, Collingwood Footy Club President, almost for life, Eddie Maguire, held the worst press conference I've seen since Prince Andrew told the BBC he went out for pizza instead of being a predatory pedophile. In the hastily convened press, a report that Maguire and his board had been sitting on since December had been leaked to the media from someone else at the club. A report that detailed a long and ugly racist culture within the club was a, and I quote, proud and historic moment for Collingwood, according to Maguire. The report had been commissioned by the club after a former premiership player, Heritier Lumumba, Brazilian-born with a Congolese father, had been subject to repeated acts of casual racism, including that his nickname at the club was Chimp, which is about as racist as it gets. There is a long and unhappy story attached to this. Lumumba's claims have been routinely dismissed by the club, and if that was not bad enough, Lumumba was cast by the senior staff at the club, including coach Nathan Buckley, as a person battling mental health problems. Now, Lumumba refused to engage with the report's authors, which is fair enough given the treatment he had suffered, but the report did find his claims proven.
Yeah, the report found that a racist culture had thrived in the club for years and no one in leadership positions had chosen to do anything about it. And of course, Maguire's no stranger to racist controversies. It's in his fucking DNA. When in 2016, he referred to Adam Goodes as an ape on breakfast radio. Fucking classy, huh? So later, this is good, Eddie Maguire claimed he made the appalling remark while on painkillers for an injured knee.
Yes, the old this OxyContin is making me racist argument. Enter a lot of old white men who came forward to tell us there was no one less racist than Eddie, and he skated away that time.
Yeah.
And calls for Maguire's resignation in the wake of the shitful press conference went unheeded too, with another bunch of old white men coming forward to defend him.
Yep, Eddie should go and really should have gone 10 years ago because he's a fucking asshole. But there were others in the media who came out of this disgracefully as well. There's other scalps.
When Lumumba first made his claims several years ago, they were examined on Channel 10's The Project by Waleed Ali and Peter Hellier. Despite abundant evidence to the contrary, Ali and Hellier instead chose to believe the story the club was putting about. No racism here, good old Collingwood, etc. Specifically, Hellier and Ali found no evidence of Lumumba's appalling nickname being used, despite numerous players subsequently coming forward to confirm it. Mm-hmm. Worse, in interview with Lumumba, Ali practically accused him of fabricating his story, at least in part. So what's the difference between Maguire and Ali? At least Maguire has apologised. Nothing but crickets from Waleed Ali, the self-appointed guardian of what's good and right in Australia. Hellier offered Lumumba a backhanded, wholly inadequate apology on Twitter, and that was it. Waleed, you owe Heritier Lumumba an abject, sincere apology, no questions asked or qualifications offered, on air at the Project in front of your audience, but not before the rest of us start thinking more deeply at what kind of half-assed journalism you and a stand-up comedian were attempting in covering a complex story about racism in sport. Now, Joel, how goes the Dominion voting machine lawsuits?
Oh, yeah. So we have previously reported on the staggering figure of $1.3 billion, which Dominion Voting Systems Incorporated is seeking from various right-wing lunatics, including Rudy Giuliani, Sidney Powell, Eldon Wood, and to a very lesser extent, Melissa Carone, a lunatic that appeared drunk while testifying in Michigan on voter fraud claims.
I have to ask you, Joel, just exactly how is Melissa Carone going to come up with $1.3 billion? I mean, really, it does paint a picture, a really grim picture of of someone coming and taking her trailer park or a trailer away from the trailer park.
Her teddy bear collection being sold on eBay. I mean, maybe she can write a book and do various book signings.
Yeah, it's not going to. It's not going to tote up to one.
It's
going to tote up. It's not going to tote up to 1.3 billion, no matter which way you cut it. Is it? No. She's in a lot of strife.
It'll be sort of like, when they get sued and at the end of the day, the damages are awarded. And it's like when you go out to dinner with a friend that you know is not doing well and you're like, oh, just put $10 in, mate. It's all right. Don't worry about it. I've got the rest.
Yeah,
no one's got the rest.
You just pay the tip. I'll pay for the meal. Yeah.
Yeah, you just pay the tip and I'll do a runner. So Dominion are pursuing further lawsuits here, and it would appear that $1 billion or so might not cover the spread. So of course they need to bring in some new defendants to share that, the aforementioned bill. These lawsuits are pivotal for reasons separate to just the Dominion business model, because disinformation and misinformation campaigns have defined the political era we are in and not fucking enjoying. We have slipped into a post-truth era very fucking comfortably, and bringing consequence to this kind of intentional political misdirection is all but guaranteed to slow down the terrifyingly confident spread of complete lies for political gain. Because, sure, politicians lie, it's a trope, we've heard it all before, but it's just gone too damn far. This is a whole new level of bullshit, and a shake-up is needed, and this actually might be it.
Well, Dominion sent letters to social platforms requesting that they preserve posts from certain people. This is basically an all-star cast of soon-to-be-broke influencer types and Fox News presenters. It's a list of names I certainly would not want to be on, Joe.
Yeah, these are the people that reeled off a whole bunch of bullshit in the immediate wake of the election and so on and so forth, and basically poured petrol on this whole stop the steal hysteria. I mean, standout names on the list for me were Ron and Jim Watkins, who seemed to actually get away with facilitating Q drops for all this time. And the idea that they could just casually destroy democracy as we know it and then just carry on pig farming is just absurd. And as usual, it takes a scorned corporation for anything to be done.
Yes.
But after all the Q drops had stopped, Ron was this bullshit half-ass expert, and his extensive misinformation campaign about Dominion voting systems on OANN after reading the manual and telling everyone about how he read the manual is not going to do him any favors in the courtroom. He basically ticked all the libel boxes. I was amazed he wasn't getting done for it, but it turns out they were just busy filling out the paperwork. But also on this list is Rebel News Online. Rebel News are the Canadian outfit funded by some creepy billionaire that are paying Avi Yemeni to be an annoying fuckwit. And they're also giving the great replacement theory advocate Lauren Southern money too. So really good people. I look forward to Rebel News going bankrupt as they are an alt-right hate chamber that should be shot into the sun.
Now, Donald J. Trump himself is on the list, which comes as no surprise, and Dominion have asked YouTube to preserve any banned content from people like Trump lawyer Jenna Ellis, Fox News pundits Lou Dobbs and Sean Hannity, and Fox News themselves, Q-Pill digital soldier and complete lunatic General Michael Flynn. Also on the chopping block is the Epoch Times, a bullshit factory which is funded by a Chinese billionaire from the Falun Gong cult who has established a media empire to get right on the arse of the CCP by keeping Trump in power.
Yeah, he's got a real chip on his shoulder. And it looks like there's going to be a lot of blood in the streets. And it's about time, because they really flapped their gums and it seemed to zero consequence. And these people must be absolutely shitting themselves, because they are guilty as fuck. Lou Dobbs' show on Fox News has been cancelled a day after Smartmatic sent their love letter. Don't let the door hit you on the fucking way out, you old prick.
Smartmatic, another voting machine company that is primarily operating in California, has decided there's some seriously easy money in nailing these idiots for libel and has put their subpoenas in the ring for a bit of dough. They are going to have a go at Fox News, Sydney and Rudy, and it looks like an absolute slam dunk.
And to be fair, the suit actually seems fair enough. The company has incurred severe losses as a result of a vicious misinformation campaign fueled by a narcissistic president and the urge for cable news networks to be more and more pilled to suit their more and more lunatic clientele. But their business is basically fucked after this. Smartmatic didn't even operate in contentious states. They operated in California, and only complete fucking pilled lunatics think that Trump won California. But also, apparently, death threats have been thrown around the place, including aimed at an executive's 14-year-old son. Now, let's not forget, QAnon is a peaceful, non-violent political movement. But every now and then, even a peaceful, non-violent political movement must ask for the head of innocent children.
Weren't they in the business of saving children, Joel? Isn't that the whole point of QAnon?
Apparently not this one. Fuck. they want to kill him.
Well, the founder of Smartmatic is Venezuelan and did indeed implement some electronic voting systems for Chavez in Venezuela. That part is true. The bit about how Chavez has posthumously rigged the election, well, that crossed the line, and it appears to be a fairly expensive line to cross.
Yeah, they're going to get fucking raked. And in more American news, our favourite pilled Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is copping more shit from her colleagues and appears to be quite happy about it, which is I think she's putting it on, but it's actually really annoying. She's so fucking smug. Anyway, Democrats in the House and Senate voted to remove her from committees on education and budget, which really makes you wonder why this absolute spanner was on a committee about education in the first place.
Bit troubling, yes.
What? So, yeah, this is probably a positive move for all school children everywhere.
Yeah, the world
upon
over.
Hearing this, fucking A. And upon hearing this, she said that she'd been freed, as she will now have a lot of spare time. And the Democrats were a bunch of morons for giving her said spare time, which may actually turn out to be true, because she's now going to have all the time in the world to be an annoying fucking pest with her fucking assault rifles and her Q-filled nonsense. But it's absolutely crucial. This Fruit Loop is nowhere near the actual corridors of power. And these committees are where the legislation's actually formed.
Yeah, and it was in that place, in the House, where good old MTG denounced her former beliefs, which include her claim that the Californian wildfires were started by space lasers operated by Jewish Democrats.
Yeah, I mean, and that's obviously true. It's ridiculous she had to retract that. But when she went over the line when she started harassing David Hogg in public, in person, the Parkland school shooting survivor, who she screamed at that he was a crisis actor and called him Little Hitler on social media. I mean, look, that's where I draw the line. Yeah. Jewish space lasers, all entirely likely, but that is ridiculous. So now she thinks the school shooting did actually happen. How fucking noble. Yeah, round of applause.
Change of heart.
So, yeah, I don't believe this for a second. I think she's still pilled.
Oh, yeah.
She just had to, make some bloody mea culpa. But she's also, this is great, in this amazing moment that should never have been necessary, like words that should never have been uttered, she said that the 9/11 attacks absolutely happened, like as if that was ever in question. I mean, even if you think it's an inside job, like the planes did hit the fucking buildings. It wasn't done in a studio. So for this piss weak so-called apology where she basically just said the shit she was required to say by her colleagues, she received a fucking standing ovation from Republicans. And this basically shows that as long as she pretends to toe the line, they have her back. And this is just a terrifying glimpse into the future of the Republican Party.
Well, she is anti-mask and has rejoiced in breathing heavily on her unwitting colleagues as a general practice, but now seems to really like masks because she can write shitty right-wing political messages on them. Trump won, end abortion, reopen America, and the right-wing classics of free speech and censored all have been emblazoned on her various masks. You aren't censored, you fucking idiot. You literally have staff that manage your media presence.
Yeah, it's fucking ridiculous. Green has used ominous imagery in her campaign on social media of her with an assault rifle standing next to the superimposed faces of Democratic Representatives Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, with the byline of defeat the Democrats. And the GOP seems completely okay with this. And this is because they are opportunistic pieces of shit.
And that leads us totally into our next segment. A segment that looks at the kind of abject human stupidity many others in the media would censoriously tell you to avoid, possibly because they think this type of dumb might actually be contagious. Yeah, it's the Trump punters Betfair fraud group.
Hey. So our Betfair Trump punters have found hope, and while it was felt that all was lost, a gentle pillow salesman and former crackhead named Mike Liddell released a self-described docu-movie with the very subtle title of Absolute Proof!
Absolute proof, all in caps.
Finally, we have absolute proof that the election was rigged. And in a show of irrational confidence and a complete disregard for impending lawsuits of billions of dollars, the My Pillow guy has released a 2-hour film on the internet of him talking to a bunch of people about the claims of electoral fraud in the last general election. We all know about them. And he starts with a whole bunch of random numbers that, if they were true, they might be concerning, but of course they're not. And they're hoping this cuts through and vitiates the election of Joe Biden. Now, vitiate is the word they really like to use at the moment because it comes from contract law and it sounds really fancy because they like to sound clever. You know, it makes up for the fact they're fucking morons who put money on Trump after the votes were counted.
I'm vitiating right now, Joe.
Oh, mate, I think everything is vitiated at this point. Yeah, that should be the new word for cancelled. You're vitiated. It's got a real ring to it. So Mike Liddell is really taking one for the team here and not without dragging his mates down with him. One notable guest is friend of the podcast, Melissa Carone, who has already received a cease and desist letter from Dominion and has now said on record that a part owner, this is like in the movie, a part owner of Dominion voting systems essentially participated in electoral fraud by stopping her from reporting anomalies in the vote counting. It's really boneheaded shit. So it's a strong claim, and it's likely to make that cease and desist letter into a real subpoena, and she's going to wind up in the same courtroom as her old mate Rudy Giuliani as they absolutely rinse her for talking this kind of complete shit.
Yeah, of course this so-called docu-movie is a bunch of the same old made-up nonsense rehashed in a flashy format with a sales pitch. And this desperate attempt to cling to hope may well prove to be a bad idea now that Dominion and Smartmatic are throwing out subpoenas left, right and centre. The claims in this video are the exact reasons why Dominion and Smartmatic are looking to sue various people. This is a doubling down of mammoth proportions and most unwise.
Yeah, it really is. Like, this is just like a condensed 2-hour, like, convenient package of the reasons why they're taking legal action. It's fucking bent. So basically, this documentary has given the Betfair guys a massive new reason to keep these bet slips intact. They really think this is going to convince everyone that Joe Biden was never elected, and it's it. And we did win California. We told you. Fuck off. So is this stupid? Yes. Are they delaying the inevitable moment of selling their assets to cover this boneheaded punt? Yes. But will they sleep well for the first time in weeks, maybe months? Yeah, they might, which is nice. And while absolute proof has given Trump a chance of becoming the president of the defunct corporation of the United States of America, many are still clinging to the idea that Trump will also be made the president of the Republic on March the 4th.
March 4
We've talked about this. This theory still sucks and has no basis in reality. We kind of have to wait to see how they react to watching that day come and go and nothing happens. I'm speculating they'll be watching absolute proof on repeat while eating Xanax like lollies to get through it. And despite all this, they still think Trump is in the West Wing. And the theory that still bounces around is that the latest breath of hope is that you cannot impeach a former president. Now, this is the idea that they couldn't be bringing this forward unless Trump was still in the White House. This is just not fucking true. There is an argument being played out similarly, which is that Republicans are saying that maybe you can't do this, and there's all sorts of stuff. Mitch McConnell just refused to table it before. They had plenty of time. So this is just complete bullshit. But essentially, anything that will invalidate Joe Biden's presidency, or vitiate it, as they would say, is good enough for them. But I don't think they're really arguing that the impeachment is legitimate due to the fact that Trump is still president, because that's a bridge too far for basically anyone, except for our Betfair Trump punter makes, who will just make up fucking anything to, support their case.
In desperation, they are trying to find out if a precedent was set by bookies when Ben Johnson was stripped of his gold medal in the Seoul Olympics in 1988, I should say, and it was awarded to second place Carl Lewis because Johnson was found to be on the juice. Quite similar to using the word vitiate, this shows a distinct lack of understanding for what precedent means in a courtroom. If these people do anything, they cling to hope. If all of this fails, they still have the class action. That relies on the idea that Betfair settled the wages before the result was out. This is delusional, of course, and relies on the idea that the point where the Electoral College met was invalid due to legal challenges. These are the legal challenges that people called the Kraken with a straight face, if you remember. Yeah, I don't hold much hope for these class action, or that particular class action.
No, it's not looking good. So basically, in a bit of a twist, in this segment, we have been focusing heavily on the losers, the idiots that bet on Trump well after the votes are counted, and even after states had certified. And Trump kept telling him that he was going to win, and they kept believing. And I can see the logic there, I suppose. So now we look at the winners. You see, the bookies run the game on most bets, but a lot of these wagers were done on market exchanges where they just take a cut. So there's Betfair Exchange, FTX, Predicted. They were all just simply taking a little bit of the action of bringing two people making a wager together. Yep. Two people, one of them with a lot of money looking for bank interest odds, some easy money, and another, a red-pilled idiot who's about to lose his house. So a friend of the podcast, Phil Whitehead, sent us a tweet from Harala Bob, which is this sort of like money market gambling guy on Twitter, which celebrated lifting some very easy money off these rubes, and I quote, "America truly is the land of opportunity. After years and years of working extremely hard to grind out every edge betting on sports, one of my biggest wins ever came by betting on the outcome of the US election, in caps, after the votes were counted. I love America."
And so he should. And this tweet really hurts to read, as it truly outlines how pathetic these wagers were. Here's a guy that likes to play money markets that saw fools who were basically begging to be parted from their money, and he did his American duty by easing them of their cash in no uncertain terms. But we can't stand around all day pointing and laughing at the Trump punters, because we have to wipe the schadenfreude from our faces and get to a segment where we drive the big trucks down 4 kilometres under the Earth's surface, grab our mattocks and shovels and start digging. It's the conditional release program's Deeper Dive. Yes, we heard at the front of the program, the Cancer Council of Australia had done this survey, and one of the results that really caught my eye was that 4 out of 10 Australians believe that cancer can be cured by alternate remedies, completely unproven remedies. And it really strikes me as that, that the wellness community is basically almost out of control. In 2015, I was diagnosed with cancer of the bladder. That was a bit of a blow. And I had to undergo treatment. There's various processes for that particular cancer that you go through. You wouldn't really call them chemotherapy, but it's a kind of therapy. It's called a BCG therapy that is injected. Everything goes through the penis. My God. And so it's not injected, but it's catheterized into the bladder. It's
invasive.
Yeah, well, it is. It is. You get used to it after a while, but the first response is what's called a BCG treatment, which is attenuated bovine tuberculosis is actually pumped into your bladder, and then you're like a rotisserie chicken. You have to roll around with a bladder full of this highly toxic stuff in your bladder, and then you roll around, and then you pass it after that, and it's hoped that will work. Look, as an aside, that it came up that a lot of people who had experienced tuberculosis and survived it had developed high rates of not immunity, but had very low rates of cancer, particularly cancer of the bladder. And that was almost 100 years ago when this was discovered. So this is where BCG came from. And it works in about two-thirds of cases. It kills
That's pretty good.
cancer cells and various tumours that might be in the bladder. They're all graded. I had grade 3s. And then some low grades as well. And that sounds good. Low grades sound good, but they're actually almost impossible to remove by fairly easy, fairly simple surgery. And it causes a problem because while those low cancers are there, they can easily become high grade. Anyway, the BCG treatments, and I think I had about 10 or 12 of these, did not work. I was scanned up afterwards, and then we went on to a different level. I entered into a clinical trial of a drug, and I thought that might have given me some benefit I was desperate to avoid surgery, and so I went along with that. But I had 2 doses of a drug called Keytruda, which is immunological drug. It's designed to supercharge the immune system, and it has been incredibly successful. In some cases, not very many, around about 20% effectiveness, I think, when I was doing the trial. But anyway, it didn't work for me, so then you could just go to remove the cancer, not by chemicals. You do it by surgery, and that means removal of the bladder, construction of a neobladder, which sits inside. It's taken from the bottom of the colon, and then and so take my bladder out, and everything sort of works normally. But then I was re-diagnosed. That was in 2018 when I had the surgery. It wasn't very pleasant. There were lots of complications. But in 2020, I was re-diagnosed late in 2019 and went through a surgical procedure again in 2020, which seems to have been fairly effective. It may well have been a follow-up. So I had a urethrectomy, actually, which is the removal of urethra from the body. And so now I have a stoma, and I catheterise when I stick a catheterise into my neobladder when I want to release my bladder, and I have to do that every 3 hours.
On the dot.
Oh, pretty much, yeah.
Otherwise, you explode.
You actually, Well, I did have one moment not long after the second surgery where I did have that explosion, and
That's not good.
it's just one of those things where fluid will get to a point where it can get out, and that's what it did. So I was that was the last time I ever urinated out of my penis.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that's the story I went through, and it is pretty grim. In all these treatments, I was treated and have been and will be at Westmead. In the west of Sydney's vast hospital and the Princess Mary Cancer Centre there. And walking in there is when you're just having your regular treatments or your scan updates and diagnoses, checks and all that sort of stuff. It can be a really it's not so much an inspirational sort of procedure, but you're seeing a lot of people sitting down in their chairs and all receiving their chemo. Now, I had BCG, I didn't have chemo, and I didn't have, radio or anything like that, touch wood so far. But there are a lot of people in there, and they're experiencing.
It wouldn't be fun.
It's not a lot of fun. They're going to suffer, hair loss and all those sort of cosmetic things that are going to
shit,
or that are going to, cause them, to stand out as a person with cancer.
That's very true.
And there are little signs around the hospital there that say, we'll offer you makeup. There are makeup for women and so forth, so they can, sort of feel themselves again. But it is quite a powerful moment to walk in and see hundreds of people just sitting in big chairs, all having chemotherapy pumped into their veins. And what I did was basically accept medical science. Basically, you're told lots of things when you get cancer, not by doctors, but from the sort of general public, friends and well-wishers and what have you, be positive and all this sort of stuff. It doesn't really work that way. What you have to really do is be positive that the people who are helping you, the medically trained people, you have to be positive that they're the people who are going to cure you.
Totally.
That there are no other cures. I mean, I was never encouraged to look at any alternate therapies. Prior to my first surgery, I was encouraged to get fit and prepare mentally and physically for the surgery. And I sort of did that. So that's all sensible stuff, proper diet, exercise, all that sort of stuff. That's different from saying, we have diets that will remove your cancer. But at the same time, while, thousands and thousands of people every year like me who are diagnosed with cancer put their faith in medical science, put their faith in knowledge and rationality. At the same time, that there's a vulnerable group. Well, everyone's vulnerable, right?
Yeah,
so
I would be.
So some people are going to look at alternate methods, and if I guess if you're doing it in conjunction with the advice of medical health professionals, there's no great drama to it. And they say, well, if you're just eating activated almonds and who cares about them? You're just going to shit them out.
Expensive.
You're just, you got very, very expensive shit is all it means.
Yeah.
And your medicos say, well, no big deal, But if you are undertaking these alternate therapies, in the absence of medical treatment, in the absence of chemo or radio or surgery, you basically anyone who does that is probably going to die. I mean,
like if you didn't get the medical treatment that you got and you decided to eat bloody almonds and apricot kernels,
I would be dead.
You'd be dead.
I would have been.
How dead? On a scale of 1 to dead.
I would have been dead last year. From the first diagnosis, I asked them how long have I got if I do nothing, and they said about 5 years. And it's deeply unpleasant. That's the other thing. It's not as if you just fall asleep one day and you don't wake up.
Yeah,
you're going through a lot of pain and unnecessary pain if you're ignoring medical advice.
And pain in your dick too. Ugh.
Well, in my case, my dick, but you've literally got. In any case, you've got literally the of metastasized tumours bursting their way through your skin, taking over most of your body, and all of this is largely unnecessary. I mean, some people, unfortunately, either have been diagnosed late or don't respond to treatment. But the and that all depends on the ferocity of the tumours, the gradation of those tumours.
We're very lucky to have the world-class treatment we have as well. I mean, like, the idea that you can have bloody bovine tuberculosis pumped up you and then have your bloody bowel turned into a bladder. Are you fucking serious? Like, it's what lunatic came up with that and then went, I'm going to go and do this, and then got through all the stages, and now you can just rock up and be like, oh, yeah, I might turn my butt into a bladder, thanks, mate. Like, what the fuck? It's just amazing. It's amazing.
It's a lot easier than transplants because it's your own tissue. There's no prospect of rejection, and it really is. When in my case, what we're broadly talking about is urological detours, and creating that means using bits and pieces. So in my stoma, which is about 2 inches to the right of my belly button, my appendix has been taken out. I still have my appendix in my late 50s, and basically that's used as a valve. So that's sewn into inside into the stoma, so that so it doesn't leak. So I can walk around with this tiny little hole, and it looks a bit like a bruise if you saw it from a distance. And there's no real hole. I mean, the hole has to be sort of created, poked into the skin every time you use a catheter. You just see it's more like it hurts a little bit. It hurts for about 3 or 4 seconds, and then it doesn't.
You get used to that.
And you sort of get used to it. You just take a few deep breaths and do it. But look, the alternatives are a lot different. So I never actually felt the need to explore any of these things. My father had died from cancer that was almost certainly skin cancer. They never quite got the where the primary tumour came from, but it was almost certainly skin cancer, and then that spread throughout his body, and it killed him at 59. So, and this was years ago. It was nearly 30 years ago, and chemo and radio, and he only had 1 dose of chemo. It didn't work, so he went home and died on his own about a month later. But nowadays, the oncological science is so highly developed.
Yeah,
it's not perfect. I mean, it's not a universal panacea, and we're a long way away from a cure for cancer. But if you have tumours growing in your body that shouldn't be there, I guarantee you that eating almonds and so forth is not going to help.
No.
And I understood that.
It might help, but it's not going to get you there.
It won't hurt. I mean, look, some of these things won't hurt, but if you are deciding, if people decide to ignore medical advice at that time, they are going to die.
Steve Jobs did it. Steve Jobs died, and he just went, you know what? I trust my buddy, my yogis more than I trust doctors.
Yeah.
He could have afforded the best medical treatment in the world, and the asshole just drank a few more fruit juices and died. That's all he did.
Yeah.
And now he is dead, and he would. Okay, I don't know to say this conclusively. There is a lot of blank, but I've heard that if he just followed medical advice, he would have at least had a chance of survival.
Well, that's just the point. And look, we can't we can't point to statistics on this, but we do know that that anyone diagnosed with a cancer is feeling especially vulnerable.
Absolutely.
Is looking at a process of treatments that might involve chemotherapy or radiotherapy. And
in the States be very expensive as well.
Well, overseas,
cost is a factor over there.
Most definitely, absolutely. Yeah. It would bankrupt most people who didn't have insurance. But
eating apricot seeds is way cheaper if you're in the States. Yeah,
that's right. So when you're vulnerable, you're going to listen to these sorts of things, or you might listen to these sorts of things. And if they are taking the place of medical treatments, it almost certainly will kill you. Once you have tumours growing in your body, there's only a certain number of ways that they will disappear, and one of those is by surgery, quite obviously. Secondly, is by chemical treatment or chemotherapy to reduce the size of those cancers, if not kill them all. And some of the more advanced medicine now is in immunologics. Immunotherapy, and that is probably the pathway to cancer treatments in the future.
Yeah, and like you get surgery done, you get the tumors cut out, and then you have the choice of doing chemo to try and stop them from coming back. Now, this is the kind of thing where when you're in some sort of remission and you want it to stay away, then there's a lot of options too, and a lot of them are really shitty. Now, I've seen grifters online who have made an absolute career out of being a bloody walking testimony for the fact that they had their cancer removed and they took a bunch of supplements and it never came back. Now, that cancer may never have come back either way. Regardless. Yeah. But the thing they don't talk a lot about is the role of medical science cutting these tumors out and saving their lives. It's all about the supplements. It's all about the shit they can sell you on their fucking e-store, and very little about the fact that the guy would be dead if he hadn't been hacked open by a professional. He would just be objectively dead. And that's the thing these guys never highlight, is the fact that the only way these shitty fucking, supplements and things like that can even have a role, as questionable as it may be, is if someone gets a knife out or does something.
Yeah, that's right. So
they don't talk about it.
It may well be a response to chemotherapy. So the chemotherapy has worked to a point. What happens when you're diagnosed with cancer is you have to be cancer-free for 5 years before you go into remission. So it's a long time before you're considered in remission. And I only know this because if it came down to getting travel insurance, for example, I can't get travel insurance because I've been diagnosed. Well, I was diagnosed, sort of a year and a half ago, re-diagnosed. Yeah. So no travel insurance for me. Well, I could get some, but if I ever had to claim on it, they go, "Well, you do have, do have that." So would get
government should take that role. That's a whole other story, but government should take that role.
So you've got a very long time with this. 5 years is kind of the minimum, obviously, so you've got a very long time to be thinking about this, and it can get pretty grim. And when there are people out there, and you've got a few names that you'd like to throw in.
Oh, I'm fucking holding that in.
I mean, it's the lowest form. It's the lowest form of con artistry, isn't it?
These motherfuckers should be hung in the streets and shown for other fucking dickheads that you don't do this. You do not take your narcissistic cult leader personality and inflict it upon people who are vulnerable so they think you're a fucking medical god. I tell you what they don't talk about. They don't talk about all the ones that stop fucking emailing them after a while. I tell you what, they exist. Yeah. You've got these fuckheads, the truth about cancer. These people are disgusting. This former fucking accountant and bodybuilder, his name's Ty Bollinger, which is the most greasy American name I can think of. And he's just this fuckhead who charges people a fortune to access these just archives of complete crap about various herbs and spices that are going to save your life. Yeah. He even has different categories of treatment, which, there's a cheap one and a more expensive one and a premium one. He's packaging according to price and basically saying, if you can afford the primo one, you've got a really good chance of living. But hey, don't worry. If you can't afford a lot, I'll take your money as well. Fuck you. And it's
you can pay less and you'll have less chance of surviving.
And he's so blatant about it. That
is hyper capitalism at its absolute worst, isn't it?
Just the worst grifters. And people like David Avocado Wolf.
Yes, he's another one.
Someone said on Facebook that he's actually a bit of a sex pest. She went to one of his bloody wellness things when she was vulnerable with a cancer, and he was giving him all sorts of bloody treatments and things like that. And she went up and said hello, and he asked for a number, and she was in her early 20s, and he just continually harassed her trying to get laid.
Lord.
What a piece of shit! He's such a fucking scumbag, and his sales tactics and the way that he monetizes his, his God complex is incredible. And he writes the most outrageous shit about supplements that are completely unfounded, and then sells the supplements. And if you do that separately, if you write on the supplement this will cure your cancer, you'll get in deep shit with the FDA. Over there, if you write a book about how a certain herb will cure your cancer with no truth in it whatsoever, and then you sell that supplement,
New York Times bestseller,
no problem. Problem solved.
Look, and as you say, the situation is compounded by the fact that the public health system and that user pays awful system in the United States prevails, and that people looking at cancer treatments are staring down the barrel of hundreds of thousands of dollars in costs if they're uninsured.
That's very difficult.
So that's where you've got, at least in this country, we have a good public health system.
Top tier, good treatment for free.
Yeah, top tier, and it really is. And having been through it a few times, I can actually speak to that. And so, there within those circumstances, there is a sort of discouragement to look at the grifters, but they're still going to exist because
they're always waiting in the bushes.
You're still staring down the barrel of treatment that's difficult.
It's fucking awful. And the thing is, the public health system isn't sexy. Like, you've got these things where David Avocado Wolf is there going, oh my God, be a part of our cult. People like Ty Bollinger is a fucking bodybuilder and is like, yeah, we're going to beat cancer because we know the truth. We know the truth that the public health system won't tell you. And then you got the public health system with a pamphlet going, oh, here's the treatment. And it's a bit rough, but, nothing sexy about that. Like, people love marketing, and people who say they don't like marketing are the ones who probably like it the fucking most. Like, you're just so gullible to this sort of shit when it's in a fancy package. And these guys spend most of their time not researching what fucking apricot kernels do, but making it look really sexy. And that's their job. And they are grifters. They are marketing grifters.
Terrible. It's the worst kind of grift, of course, isn't it? Look, just to explain what cancer is basically, a cellular fuck up, right? I mean, it's basically an abnormal cellular growth, and then there's more of them, and then there's more of them, and then there's more of them. They become visible. Dogs can't smell them, by the way, or if they do, or if they can, they have a very good sense of smell. If a dog can smell a cancer, it's not as if it's going to go, roo, 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 roo.
I've seen those stories and those YouTube clips and stuff, and they just sound like such bullshit. I mean, look, what if a dog does fucking sniff your cancer? What? You're like, oh, thanks, Fido, for reminding me I'm going to die.
Probably wants to eat it. And so we have this situation, and it is where grifters are going to grift, isn't it? But where people are extremely vulnerable and looking at potentially the loss of their lives. So what better grifter pool, and what better way to pay to part people from their money in fairly large amounts, of course.
Truth about cancer charges a lot of money for people to find out their little fucking secrets.
And look, we've also got Evans as well. Evans has actually publicly said that that his dietary treatments and so forth have cured cancer. Sometimes he'll add, in combination with accepted medical treatments.
Which is something I'm okay with.
Which is, look, I don't. Once people get diagnosed with cancer, I don't really have a problem with what they do, as long as they follow their treatments. Because if you don't, you're going to die. If you get if you got cancer of the prostate and you're 98, well,
I suppose that's that.
Maybe you don't really want to have treatment because it's all a bit.
And that's fair enough.
And that's fair enough too.
With, like Pete Evans though, like he says, in combination with traditional medical, medical treatments. But then in the next breath, he will say how chemo is poison and doctors can't be trusted. And you're sort of sitting there thinking, okay, so did you say that you're gonna eat keto to stave off cancer? And that's in combination with your doctor's advice. Do you mean that? Are you just saying that as a disclaimer to stay out of trouble? And I don't think he means it, but that's just opinion. I don't know. I'm not on his head, but I don't think he means it. And I genuinely don't know, because I think Pete does believe his own bullshit. I genuinely don't know what he would do if he got that diagnosis.
Well, it would be extremely interesting to see, and of course we don't wish cancer on people, but even Pete Evans, this is the wellness grift writ large. This is kind of where the wellness community sort of turned from becoming harmless wackos to be extremely dangerous people, where those people have dismissed medical science, discourage people from receiving proper treatment, and then seek to, basically make financial gain out of someone else's misery. I mean, it's as low as it gets, isn't it?
And this is, of course, bled into the COVID thing where, recently I saw a video of a guy who was saying, I'm going to take my dad home. We have a ventilator, which I don't believe, and we're going to put him on something like ivermectin, vitamin C, D, and zinc or something. There was a combination of shit he was going to give him. It was all the red pill talking points. And basically this doctor had to say, if you move your father, he will die. He cannot be taken off this ventilator. And he just keeps on reeling off all these internet talking points. And the thing that's insane about this is that guy who became peeled from these clips, let's say he's watched 1,000 YouTube clips. He has probably given about an aggregate total of about $50 in advertising revenue to grifters. There are millions of these people, and for the gain of a few cents of a click, people are happy to convince people of terrible ideas that might kill their loved ones. And some people said, quite rightly, that maybe he's actually just putting this on to to get the payout early, maybe get his inheritance before the not have to wait around for it.
I mean, legally, you could make a very good argument for manslaughter, and perhaps that's something that that should be looked at in that case. One of the other things that I'd like to mention is that sometimes, as good a public health system as we've got in this country, one of the things that you might say of medical science is that they don't always communicate very well. I've been very lucky. The person that I see is a professor of urology. He's an urbane and brilliant communicator, sometimes very busy man. I mean, when people do see specialists, sometimes due to the nature of their work, they've only got 2-3 minutes with you.
You really don't get a lot of time.
Well, and then of course you come across a site that says I can cure your cancer and here's why, and there'll be pages and pages of stuff, right? Or junk, but at least there's an explanation there. And so that's
compelling junk.
So that's another thing medical science needs to be better at, just that communication. And
I think so. And the marketing, it really is hard, but because the thing is medical misinformation very quickly turns into a cult. And in situations like that, how are you supposed to fight some kind of cult-like hierarchy of bringing people in, accepting them, clapping for them when they speak and all that sort of shit, as opposed to walking into a cold room, taking a number and sitting down and playing with your phone until you see a specialist who makes you wait 15 more minutes and then comes in, looks at your chart, says 5 minutes worth of stuff tops, and then kicks you out. Tops, yeah. And that's not sexy.
It's definitely not sexy,
and it shouldn't have to be.
And it can leave people confused. They'll walk away, think, "Oh God, I should have asked that, and I shouldn't have." And,
that's it. Yeah,
and then they go back to Dr. Google, and then they might go from Dr. Google to somewhere else. That's where they at least feel that they're that they have some sort of knowledge base. And that's the thing. I mean, doctors aren't marketers. They're just not. No,
they're just and they shouldn't have to be.
And they shouldn't have to be. But perhaps there needs to be some sort of communication training that's offered to specialists that can.
In this climate,
if they've only got 3 minutes, then use that 3 minutes. Use that 3 minutes.
Or have some sort of supplementary service that you can get, this sort of, YouTube videos for public health. I mean, maybe that's a solution where you can have, but they probably do, and they probably suck. Like, it's just so hard.
It is. It is
really hard.
And basically, it's just, you do get the sense in the public health system that you and they are all in sort of, all sort of in different parts of one great big wheel that pushes things along, and you're part of a process, and they'll follow that process with you. And look, if you're in that position, go armed with questions, right? Go armed with questions.
Make a list, maybe.
Don't pull any Dr. Google shit. For God's sake, doctors hate that stuff. But say, look, if I'm feeling like this, why? Why am I feeling like this? Why am I? Is there any support services? Maybe there's some counselling services that you can attend to. All that sort of stuff, because it is a great shock. It's a great shock to your family and friends when it does happen, and then you've got a whole welter of people who stand around you and urge you to be positive, which is really nice in its way, but it's kind of pointless. It is a little bit pointless, but
well, we've been very lucky to not have to really worry too much about COVID in the country. We have, and I'm not discounting those who who, had an issue.
Yeah, but
or died,
I guess what you're talking about is European or American type situation.
Absolutely. Like if we're in a situation where we got a COVID diagnosis and then, sort of went home, scurried home and stayed locked up in a room and, drank some soup and sat. And then you got to the point where you started really not breathing well and thinking, fuck, maybe this has got to go to hospital. And, and you've been listening to Craig Kelly and you've been listening to Pete Evans and you've been listening to fucking David Avocado Wolf. And they won't give you the hydroxychloroquine. They won't give you the ivermectin. They won't give you vitamin D. You're not getting sunlight and you are freaking the fuck out because all of a sudden, all this stuff that you've heard online, which has been perpetuated through not only like a ridiculous content manufacturing machine, but also a political machine, which is the Trumps and various right-wing organizations that have equated this medical advice of you should take hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin with party affiliation and general, sort of political identity. And it's almost like you go in there and they ask you who you'd vote for, and that's the fucking treatment they give you. Oh, are you a Trump voter? Okay, cool. We'll give you hydroxychloroquine. It would make more sense.
But we've talked about this in other episodes. So the wellness community, it basically, we know they're gullible. We know they challenge orthodoxy. And so that makes that group vulnerable to extremist sort of propaganda. And that's why when you wonder, how did hydroxychloroquine become part of the argument, become part of the treatment? And there were so many media types who were pushing this stuff around. Why wouldn't you do it? Why wouldn't you do it? And you think, where does this all come from? And it generated essentially from political propaganda.
Yeah. It really did.
Hard right stuff. It did because you sort of leach across into our media here. You see people like Craig Kelly pushing it about. It's no surprise. I mean, look, if it worked, it would be a miracle. It's no surprise. It's an anti-malarial drug. Now, it's not designed. Malaria is caused by a parasite. It's not designed to kill the parasite. It's actually designed to manage fever.
Yeah.
So there may be some instances where it coincides with someone suffering from fever, but essentially what they have with COVID, the really dangerous stuff, is respiratory problems.
Yep.
So it would be highly unusual for it if it was to work. I mean, as the anti-malarial's been around for almost 100 years. The other one, the anti-parasitic, that's used in the treatment of head lice. I mean, it's used it has veterinary uses as well. I mean, the whole idea that those two drugs together can form some miracle cure is kind of bizarre. If it does, well then let's subject it to a clinical trial and let's check the results with people who are qualified to analyse those clinical trials and talk about them. What Kelly was actually proposing is that those two drugs, what's the second one, Joel?
Ivermectin
and hydroxychloroquine, if taken in combination, would not necessitate, it should be used instead of a vaccine.
Yeah.
Kelly, and there's another one there, an LNP Senator, Jared Rennick, they're both saying that they'll have to consider their position and can do all the fact finding and so forth before they take the vaccine. These are political leaders in the country, in the community. We've heard Hanson, she hasn't come quite out with the anti-vaccine, but anyone who's followed One Nation will see it basically as a home base for a lot of anti-vaxxers. Hanson's babbled about companies like Qantas, for example, who have said, basically, we don't want people on their flights who haven't received the vaccine.
Which is a no-brainer.
You would think so, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
And, it's just basically risk management on behalf of a commercial aviation company. So Hanson's sort of talking about lack of freedom of movement or freedom of association or some sort of nonsense like that. So here in our parliament, in our federal parliament, while there are leaders for good or ill, or sometimes they aren't perfect, but at least our political leaders are saying follow the science, follow the follow the knowledge, follow the information, follow the immunologists, follow the virologists, follow the epidemiologists. That's how we're making policy. We still, in our federal parliament, have the place littered with idiots, idiots who have drunk deeply from the extreme right wing.
Absolutely.
Cool.
And the thing is, you can follow immunologists, you can follow virologists, you can follow the inventor of the PCR test, Carrie Mullins, and you can pull quotes that say that the PCR tests are complete bullshit, and no one mentions the fact that this guy went completely insane and denied the existence of AIDS. But, you can do exactly what Craig Kelly says, and you can be listening to all these doctors and just cherry pick lunatics. Stella Emanuel, she's a doctor. Great. And she thinks that fucking, demon sperm is a thing. So this is the thing. You can pick and choose your truth and you can pick and choose your experts, which makes it really difficult to say. This is something we're saying a lot in this episode. Follow the experts. Well, follow which experts? What, the ones that align with your sense of politics? The right wing or the left wing experts?
Look,
now?
It's difficult, but at the same time, that so in terms of scientific discovery, there's going to be debates. There's going to be arguments.
It's not healthy debate though. It's partisan debate, and that's weird.
When you've got so Kelly keeps talking about this immunologist at the University of Newcastle,
the senior one, what, the old one?
Well, no, look,
the one that's about a million years old.
Well, the university had to say, look, he's not one that we would get advice from, but he is an immunologist, I think, and Kelly says he's one of the leading ones in the country. But that
because he agrees with him.
Well, no, the thing is the immunologist doesn't agree with Kelly. The immunologist says, okay, I can see benefits coming from hydroxychloroquine, etc., but he's not saying don't vaccinate.
Yeah.
So this is the wormhole that we're sort of moving down when you've got people in your federal parliament who are basically anti-vaxxers with some provisos. It's a terrible place for us to be in. I mean, one thing that we can say is that COVID's touch on this country has been pretty light, and that's essentially been driven by good public policy. Sometimes we could debate whether it was over the top. Sometimes we could debate whether border lockdowns were on too long or shouldn't have happened at all, and those sorts of things. But generally speaking, it's been pretty good.
Saved our ass.
And it's been pretty good because, one, we're a great big stonking island continent, and it's not easy for people to get in and out, particularly with travel bans. And two, because our state administrators and our federal guys have said, okay, what do the specialists say? What do the immunologists and epidemiologists say, who were employed essentially by the Commonwealth? Or by their states, what are they saying? And then we'll follow that advice.
Yeah.
And that's how we've got to where we are now, with less than 1,000 deaths and an infection rate, which is the envy of the world.
Yeah. And that's the thing. Like, it's really quite frustrating to watch these, sort of anti-mask, anti-lockdown types. And it's like, have you not just realized you've just got to slink away into the night at this point, because it has worked? And then it's like, oh, well, all the deaths overseas are fake, or everything is fine, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, no. Like, this is just getting fucking silly. What's happened is at great expense to the country, both financially, psychologically, and emotionally. We have closed our borders to the world. We have stifled trade in several different ways, but we have avoided something. And in the grand scheme of things, these 2 years of sacrifice will mean that we have people walking on the earth that would not be otherwise, for starters, and a whole generation of people who aren't plagued with chronic fatigue syndromes, who don't have recurring respiratory issues. This virus is a real dickhead, and all the ridiculous fucking, think positive. If you think negative about the virus, it just makes it what? No. This thing has awful residual effects, and I'm really glad that I'm not a part of those statistics. I don't want to be on that Excel spreadsheet. I just fucking don't.
There's a lot of people too will require dialysis for the rest of their lives, or go on to kidney transplant lists as well, because that's something COVID will also wipe out. Not all the time, but
No.
and of course, people are often asymptomatic. But those who suffer from it can have enduring respiratory problems, enduring cardiac problems, enduring renal problems, and serious ones,
It's just a shit of a virus.
Yeah, and look, it's a terrible bloody thing, and we'll knock it over, but the only way we can knock it over is by listening to people who know what they're talking about.
Absolutely.
And Craig Kelly and Jared Rennick and Pauline Hanson, they don't know what they're talking about. So I guess it's easy for people, to take that on board, but there is a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of information out there. So
I'll tell you what, other source of information that doesn't know what they're talking about are fitness influencers.
Yeah, there you go.
They just do not know what they're talking about.
I mean, we've got a group of people. I don't even think there's any sort of real training. I think there are sort of training for.
Oh, you do a tape course on personal training. Yeah, you know where the muscles are and how to fuck with them.
Yeah, that's basic 3 months sort of tape course or whatever. Nothing really.
And they don't really give a fuck about it.
And they will develop their own stupid theories based on. This wellness thing. So the wellness community getting into that oncological matter, into cancer treatments and so forth, is a sort of natural extension, and really horrible and egregious sort of behaviour that seeks to profit from it. And then obviously now we go bang with a pandemic as of early last year anyway, and out these people come again.
Yep. COVID denial gets clicks. Like anything that basically says, drink bleach and you'll be fine gets fucking clicks. People like looking at this stuff. This is like it's a cult. These people spend all of their time on the internet. So when it comes down to it, you've got things like Plandemic that is just really an interview with a fucking grifter, but heavily amplified by people like Steve Bannon. This sort of thing was an intentional politicization of like a medical issue. And then you have people on the coattails of that on Instagram who thrive on clicks and followers. And a follower count actually translates into money, because that's how they get their sponsorships, where they endorse products, which inevitably will be supplements that have spurious claims about curing COVID-19. This is money to them. So they see this happening, they get on board, and whether they believe their own bullshit or not, they spread medical misinformation, which damages people's chances of, sort of overcoming what is a generational challenge and a virus. And they do it so they can make fucking 5 cents a click on fucking, vitamin D gummies. Fucking assholes. I really, really don't like Instagram influencers. I really don't like them after this past year.
Yes, look, that's absolutely right.
But that's enough about grifter hippies and snake oil salesmen, because we need to focus on a higher breed of salesmen, not these Instagram grifters, but a real man, the only man that I would put in charge of my various business interests, which definitely exist, because there's only one Eric Trump, and he's like
a bastard
on Father's Day.
Terrible news, listeners. It's what we all had hoped would not happen. Eric Trump has been impeached, not once or even twice like the Donald, but impeached many hundreds of times. Last week we heard the devastating news that Eric, who is a good-looking boy, despite having a foot fungus the medical community has described as awful to look at and possibly terminal, was last seen rummaging through the bins at the White House, unaware that his dad,
Love you, Dad,
had moved on. In a remarkable feat of endurance that one day will make us straight to the Hallmark Channel movie, Eric travelled the 1,041 miles on foot, sticking his nose in the air from time to time to catch the scent of one of his father's KFC double-down burger farts. As it turns out, Eric is more cadaverous-smelling dog than human being, and he turned up at Mar-a-Lago, South Palm Beach, Florida, naked, crying and bleeding from the scabs he'd picked off his groin. At once horrified and impressed that Eric had developed a homing instinct, the Trump family knew then they could not simply take Eric for a long drive before kicking him out of the strip mall in Jacksonville before speeding off. So after a brief discussion, the Trump family decided to impeach Eric on cooked-up charges that the great idea that Eric hadn't come up with, Trump Store, hadn't sold so much as a pair of Trump shit catchers, pack of 3, $450, postage and handling excluded.
Bargain.
Bargain, absolutely. Since Donald got the arse all the way back in November. Allowed only 12 seconds to respond to the charges, Eric merely said, Love you, Dad! But it wouldn't save Eric. The Ivanka and Jared Kushner bloc voted to impeach. Junior was doing a line out the back and abstained, while Kimberly Guilfoyle was giving hand relief to the Donald, who has been incredibly tense since the failed coup d'etat on January 6. The Donald signed an executive order restraining Eric from entering Mar-a-Lago unless Eric was caddying for him, in which case Eric was prohibited from sitting in the golf cart and certainly not allowed to drive the golf cart. After that time, Eric caused a 6-car collision that killed 12 people, and Mike Flynn had to be cut out with the jaws of life.
Big mess.
Eric, who is a good-looking boy now, lives in the rough outside the third fairway, and the only contact he has with his father is when his dad, love you, Dad, tells him to pass the 7-iron and shut the fuck up. But at least he's home now, Joel, where he belongs. But there's no more time for that, because now it is time for this. A segment of the program, Caravanning Monthly, described as spacious on the inside with all the conveniences of home at your fingertips. Ooh. It's the Week in Pete Evans.
It has been a huge week in Pete Evans, with him once again making the headlines for aligning with shit people in a spectacular, shameless kind of way. This time, it's his special guest on his, as it turns out, quite badly produced Evolve podcast. I was expecting a lot more from this, and to be honest, it was a little bit of a fizzer.
It's disappointing.
Now, a huge part of the conditional release program is that we cater to people who are interested in fringe politics, but don't want to walk in the mangroves of actual fringe politics.
That's right.
Because it is a truly dirty business, and it takes a certain type of masochist to enjoy it. You're the kind of people that find success in life and have families that love them. I, on the other hand, get a deep satisfaction from watching Wingnuts and Lunatics unfold in public, and it is hard fucking work. So, without further ado, here's a summary of the Craig Kelly interview. Went for about 76 minutes, and that is time I am never getting back. So, at first it goes like this. Basically, Kelly flogs on about his time in Parliament. Oh, it's such an honour. He comes across as kind of sane and reasonable, like a backbencher who represents his constituents, and he talks about robust debate and actually gives some interesting insights into life in Parliament House as a politician, for those who've never really been a part of that. And I was hoping he'd mention the famous Aussies Cafe at some point, but I don't think anyone ever actually invited him down there. So he probably just got a takeaway and went back to his fucking office. But robust debate really does stick in this whole thing. He really talks about it a lot. Apparently you have to debate your case, which is funny because he says this almost like he listens to people. And not quite. So Pete gets bored of all this politics is just for nerds and steers him toward coronavirus. It's, of course, just the bait. So this leads him down the hydroxychloroquine rabbit hole, which for him is very deep. He just reels off a bunch of pill doctors we've all heard of before, bullshit stage studies, claims they're all peer-reviewed when they're actually preprints. I don't think he knows the difference. He relies so heavily on the idea they're peer-reviewed. Did he ever actually check that they were? Anyway, so
it's easy to check, by the way. It is very easy to check.
Yeah, I mean,
very easy to check.
Unless your source of information is YouTube, which makes it really tricky because you're like, oh, can you say that again? So it basically parrots a bunch of red pill talking points about, hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin. And I just love this bit, though, because here we have Pete Evans, who, from what I've seen, believes that COVID is actually a hoax, a common cold that's been used to drum up fear and instill control in the populace. So he's sitting there while Kelly's venting about hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin are effective and would save lives. And Pete Evans has to sit there and just sort of be okay with the idea that that coronavirus actually kills people, because Pete doesn't believe that. So, but he's good like that because he's an opportunistic grifter. He's not the kind of guy who's going to jump in there and interrupt and challenge an idea because, that means you'd have to think. And that's really difficult. That's why he has these guests on and has these pre-scripted questions. He really doesn't do any heavy lifting in these podcasts. He fucking sucks as an interviewer.
The only reason he has someone like Kelly on is because he knows people are going to go and watch it. Appalled people, political journalists in Canberra are going to go watch it. There's just all of a sudden there's going to be a big turnout. That's the whole thing. Yeah. He doesn't agree with Kelly. I mean, he thinks we're living with a plandemic.
Yeah, and also he probably thinks that Kelly is a reptile. So, there's that. I mean, he's in the government, right?
It does look a little bit reptilian, Craig, doesn't he?
More like a hedgehog, I find. Like a cartoon hedgehog.
Triceratops, I was going to go with.
Yeah, I like it. It's good.
He did have a punch-up with one. Sorry, yes, but go on.
Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me. Yeah, he probably won too. Terrifying bastard. Unsurprisingly, everything is the fault of the media.
Yes,
it's not like the Australian or the Telegraph or the Sydney Morning Herald or even the ABC, but the media. So as we go through it, we find out they're basically talking about the ABC because, if they mention the media, but it's not the ABC, they sort of mention that the media. Oh, but not the ABC. It's like, oh, okay.
So when they got good things, okay.
Yeah. So whenever someone says the media, it's an instant red flag. What is the media? Do they hold meetings in dark, smoky rooms to set out a narrative to brainwash the masses? Well, they do.
We don't.
But
we don't.
Well, I mean, prove it, yeah? I heard it on a podcast, so fuck you. These people, it's so weird because politicians know journalists. Pete Evans has probably never met a journalist in his fucking life. But,
not a real one, no.
Craig Kelly, he deals with these people. It's just weird. Anyway, so for both of them, they're, of course, outspoken martyrs. And the media's tried to pull them down, but their bravery persists. And they've lost and sacrificed for their cause. Pete Evans lost his job. Craig Kelly's about to lose his fucking seat. And this is just so they can spread bullshit to gullible people and get some sort of hero complex about being a fucking woke outsider. But they do, regardless of all they've lost, persist on their noble cause of pilling people. How brilliant! Would you like a fucking medal? Maybe made of, fucking cyanide? So, I mentioned robust debate at the start of this, and this comes up a lot. And, of course, the whole fabled free speech. I can't help but to find it a little bit fucking jarring to be lectured on robust debate and free speech by two people who are famous for deleting comments and blocking posters from their social media accounts. Seriously, big tech might be censoring you, but you guys also seem to be doing your own fucking heavy lifting in that department, having probably got staff employed to delete dissenting opinions on your social media to protect your fragile, narcissistic egos. It's not a huge shock horror that these guys are fucking hypocritical dickheads and would say one thing and mean another, but this really needs to be hammered home, and I think it's something he should be really held to account at the moment because fuck you. Do not lecture me on free speech, you hypocritical piece of triceratopian shit. Now, the other thing that he likes to fucking rattle on about in the podcast are health bureaucrats, but only the ones he disagrees with. Because he's more than happy to talk about his health bureaucrats, the ones that agree with Trumpian research appointed by fucking dead shits in America to make some sort of weird claims. Most of them, of course, are just a bunch of hacks. And he does bring up their salaries, though. This is probably the one thing I did agree with. They are paid an insane amount of money.
It's not an insane amount of money. That's just top end public service money.
It's one thing he says, and this is quite valid, is that our bureaucrats in mid-level sections get paid more than Fauci. And it's a lot. It's a lot. It's it's $500,000. But this is great because then he goes on this weird fucking right-wing tangent about how public service salaries are stifling innovation. Mostly because he's an idiot who is out of touch with reality. But it's that thing of people are just going to give up and go to the fucking public sector. I tell you what, maybe you should have done that a little bit earlier before you ruin the fucking furniture business. What do you innovate? What about the private sector do you make better? I'm sorry, you're fucking lucky to be on an MP salary. You are lucky to be on a salary, you unemployable fuck.
Elected in 2010, Craig Kelly came from, he was a part of the family furniture business. And not long before he entered the parliament, that furniture business closed its doors, leaving creditors and employers with debts of $4 million. Now, there was some ructions about this in the parliament when Kelly first arrived, that there was concern that he and his brother may have acted as de facto directors, in which case they would have become potentially liable for the $4 million in debt. But this was argued away and ultimately accepted. Certainly, you would have to say, Kelly, whose family had been in the business of importing mainly flat pack type furniture and then on selling it to companies like Harvey Norman and those sorts of places, big retail outlets, and then came a cropper. Yeah, so you could say that, for all Kelly's expertise on on health and the pandemic, he wasn't so bloody good with the furniture sales.
Yeah, well, at least he's being taken care of, because I would otherwise have worried. Now, the next part of the pod is where Pete makes this great point that I fucking love, that he doesn't look for conspiracy theories, and he wants to believe in the good of people and their actions and all that sort of bullshit. That is such nonsense. I've never seen someone's eyes light up the way he does when he thinks about the fucking cabal that runs the world and all that sort of shit. He gets fucking boners when he talks about reptile people, and without it, his life will be fucking soulless. So I'm not buying it, Pete. You do look for conspiracy theories. You look under the couch for conspiracy theories. You find them in places they don't exist. So this is great because they wind up ending the podcast on this big circle jerk about the importance of free speech, which made me fucking cringe in my car because, honestly, you don't believe in the concept. You do not practice what you preach.
That's right.
Fucking
neither of them do.
Shithead liars. God, man, it's so fucking painful. So, and then the end, it's great. So a voiceover comes across, and I think this is probably on every episode. I've only listened to one of them. Oh, so badly produced. It's just not worth it. And explaining that nothing in the podcast is a substitute for professional advice, and that the opinions are not Pete's, etc., etc. Essentially washing its hands of any liability from the fuck-nutted people he has on his podcast, like Dr. Zach Bush, who thinks that germs don't exist. Like, AIDS deniers, David Icke, Holocaust deniers, all these fucking scumbags. But I'm not convinced this will hold up well in court, because he publishes these under his Evolve banner, and publishers are liable for things that are said on their medium.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter about disclaimers.
Don't know that disclaimer's going to be much chop. No.
So we're not sure, but if any defamation lawyers want to clear that one up for us, send us an email.
Please.
And the best answer gets our business to defend our first defamation case. I tell you what, there's money in it.
Well, there's work. There's work about money, but there's work.
There's work, yes. We'll pay you in twisties and fucking Craig Kelly podcasts.
You have been listening to the Conditional Release Program with your host, Jack the Insider and Joel Hill. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. And if you've enjoyed our bullshit, throw us a 5-star review on your podcast app.
Jack can be found on Twitter on @JackTheInsider and Joel on @CrunchyMoses with a K. We've set up a Facebook page you can find pretty easily if you search for it. But I have to say, if you've made it this far, promoting a podcast is easier said than done. If you share your own podcast on pages, people think you're a fucking prat. So if you could share this for us, share it to your friends. If you thought this episode sucked, maybe do another one. Like people like incels, share that. Or just share everything. We would be really grateful if you did it.
Yes, we would. And finally, all feedback, tips and death threats should be sent to the Conditional Release Program @gmail.com. We would love to hear from you, even if you're Craig Kelly, demanding that we stop recording podcasts that make him look like a tormented child who's pissed his pants in the sandpit. Thank you, listeners. See you next week.
Cheers, guys. See you then.